الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. I ask Allah to grant us Iman and Tawfiq, and that He allows us to get closer to Him, and that He accepts from us everything we put forth, and that He doesn't humiliate us in the dunya and in the akhirah. Before we begin today's lecture, I think it's very important for us to highlight, with the thing that's happening in the world right now, a very important principle in how the ulama understand the Shariah. And you will find that the ulama of all the madhahib will agree that the Shariah, which is known in the Arabic, has an objective which is called maqasid al-Shariah, as in the objectives of the Shariah. What are they? How do we understand what the Shariah is? What the outcome of the Shariah should be? And in order for us to have that, we obviously need to have a firm ground in knowledge of the Quran, the Sunnah, but we also need to have principles. And that's why this field and this science and this subject as the maqasid al-Shariah is very, very important, so that we can understand where to place what ruling where. Now the ulama have generally said that the maqasid of the Shariah consist of three areas. Those which are known as the daruriyat. And the daruriyat are the things that human beings need to live. And without these, life on earth would cease to exist, or cease to exist in a proper and a correct manner. And the ulama have said these daruriyat consist of 5 things. And there's a difference of opinion as to which one is more important than the other, but we will list the 5 according to what the correct opinion is in terms of their importance. So the first thing is the religion. The religion of Islam must be preserved, and the religious rights of other people must be preserved also. And when we are talking about the religious rights of the Muslim, what it refers to are the symbols of Islam, the things that are needed for Islam to exist and to sustain itself and to carry on. And we'll give examples of that and how it applies with the virus and the things that we are seeing in the world today. So Islam, meaning how Islam remains preserved and how it is applied within society and in our own lives, that must be preserved. And like I said, all of the ulama, there's no disagreement on that. The first thing is religion. The second thing is the person's life. The third thing, so anything that is needed to preserve life in the dunya is one of the maqasid and the objectives of the Shariah. Now we're talking about irrespective of whether they are Muslim or not. From the maqasid of the Shariah is that it has come to preserve human life. And anything that is needed to preserve human life must be upheld. The third thing is lineage. Whatever is needed to preserve one another's lineage. And that's why we can see, for example, things like zina and things like that are haram. And one of the greatest deeds that a Muslim can ever do is be dutiful to his parents, to his mother, to his father, and uphold the ties of relatives. Why? Because one of the objectives of the Sharia is that it has come to preserve people's lineage so it doesn't get lost. Again, irrespective of whether the person is Muslim or not. The fourth maqasid of the Sharia is to preserve people's intellect and to preserve their right towards education and not to mislead them so that they will then be in a state of ignorance. Islam has come as an objective of the Sharia to enhance education and intellect and learning. And the fifth thing that the Sharia comes to preserve, and one of the objectives of the Sharia, is to encourage and preserve wealth and economy and production, and to make sure that those rights are preserved for one another. These are the 5 that the ulama are agreed on, and like I said, there is no difference of opinion. The only difference is on how they apply and the order that they're in. So now, for example, what is a symbol of Islam? Is the 5 daily prayers a symbol of Islam? Or is it, as the majority have said, no, the Jumu'ah is a symbol of Islam, and throughout the rest of the week, if people don't pray in the mosque, it's not as if they've left a symbol of Islam. And you can see how that will apply with the coronavirus. So now, as a principle, they haven't disagreed, but in its application, you will find differences of opinion. That's the first thing. This is one of the major maqasid of the Shariah, which is to preserve the daruriyat. The second thing that it comes to preserve are the hajiyat. And the hajiyat refers to whatever is needed of a general good for the people living on earth. And if this general good is removed, humans will then live in a life of hardship. So the Shariah has come to recognize that and say, look, if mankind needs this thing, not from the essential things that they need to live, like water and sleep and those kind of things, things that if you don't have, it will cause a great deal of hardship, then Islam has come to preserve that. And it says it's wajib that we must make sure that these things are upheld. That's the second thing. So the second thing is the hajiyat, those things which are needed for a general good, for ease in our lives, and without that, it will cause a great deal of hardship for everyone. The third thing that the Islamic model of the Sharia came to preserve and to enhance is something which is known as the kamaliyat. And the kamaliyat refers to whatever is needed to make life easier, but it's not an essential. And without it, your life would be okay. It won't be difficult. But the kamaliyat enhance your life and enhance the other two in making it easier. How does that apply to the coronavirus? How does it apply to with what we're going through right now in the scenario that we're in? Before we discuss that, we have an incident, and this is from the evidences to prove that the ulama have used in proving that there are daruriyat and hajiyat and kamaliyat. And also, this is the same evidence which is used for us understanding on how to interact with diseases. Now, Umar radiallahu anh wanted to carry out jihad and make a conquering of Bayt al-Maqdis. Now, we have to remember at that time, there was no threat from outside to the Muslim Ummah. He just wanted to go forth and liberate that land. So that kind of jihad and that kind of expedition, is that from the daruriyat? Is it from the hajiyat or is it from the kamaliyat? Kamaliyat, because there is no haja and there is no darura. There is no absolute necessity. If they don't go there, there's going to be a problem. And if they didn't go there, would it be a harm upon the ummah? No, it wouldn't have been. He just wanted to go there and liberate that land. Right. So he's marching forward, and they hear that there's a plague in that region, and that then spread it towards the Muslim region eventually. However, it started off from that direction. And as we've seen before, historians have mentioned, is because of the hygiene levels and the things that they were with their food. They were having insects and rodents and things like that, infiltrated the food, and then that got imported into the Muslim Ummah, and that came with diseases, and that led to a plague. But the point here is that Abdullah ibn Amr ibn As, he said, don't go there, because I heard from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if you hear of a land that has a plague, and you are trying to travel into that land, don't go in that land. And if you're already in that land, don't exit that land. So now, what is Abdullah ibn Amr instilling in this situation? What is he advising Umar with? The daruriyat, the hajiyat, or the kamaliyat? The daruriyat. He's saying, no, your life takes a precedence. Your religion takes a precedence. The rights of other people takes a precedence. So Umar understood the situation and he backed down. So this is proof that some things are from the daruriyat, and some things are from the hajiyat, and some things are from the kamaliyat. And it's also proof that the daruriyat take precedence over everything else. Now when we understand that, we can now then understand with some of the things that we are hearing from this mosque as well, and other masajid, etc., as to what we should be doing, not just Islamically, but also with the changes that we should make in our routines, in our daily life, so that we can then remain preserved and that the virus doesn't affect us. And from them, from the basic ones, we find washing hands and reducing contact with one another and covering your mouth if you need to sneeze or if you need to cough, etc. Staying away from people who have the disease already because it is contagious, or some people who have cold-like symptoms, etc. Now the Shariah says that in its asl, that would be from the hajiyat. If you know a person who has a disease or something like that, he's got an infection, Islamically it's recommended for a person to visit another person if he's not well. But if you fear that the illness is contagious, then the ulama have said then it's not recommended for you to visit that person, because it's from the hajiyat. You need to protect yourself, and if you were to fall into that, you will end up with a cold yourself. This is in a normal situation. We're not talking about coronavirus. We're just talking about a normal situation in visiting the ill. What's the ruling on washing hands? Is it from the daruriyat, the hajiyat, or the kamaliyat? Islam says no, you need to preserve your hygiene. So it's not just from the kamaliyat. But sometimes it will be from the kamaliyat. So do you wash your hands before you eat and after you eat? It's not going to harm anyone, but it just makes it nicer. So now you can understand, some of them are from the daruriyat, some of them from the hajiyat, the same action can perhaps even be from the different categories. So now, we have now entered into uncharted territory. We don't really know what's going on. We don't know what's going to happen next week. This mosque might even be shut down according to government legislation. There might not even be a Jum'ah next week. We might not even have 5 daily prayers. And they're telling us now that we need to keep drinking water and reduce contact and wash our hands after shaking hands, if you have to shake hands, etc. All of these things, a person will think, well, I don't believe in it. It's nonsense. And I will carry on being a Muslim. But that's not what Islam tells us. Islam tells us, no, some of them are daruriyat, some of them are hajiyat, some of them got the kamaliyat. Now, a person will say, no, I want to come to the mosque. Nobody can stop me from coming to the mosque. Where do we place coming to the mosque to pray your normal salah on a regular basis? Is it from the daruriyat? Is it from the hajiyat? Or is it from the kamaliyat? Some of the ulama will say, no, it's from the daruriyat. It's wajib for you to pray in the mosque. And it's from the symbols of Islam. Whereas the majority of the ulama will say, no, it's from the hajiyat. Some of them will say it's from the kamaliyat. It's those things you get extra reward in, but if you pray at home, you'll still be rewarded. The issue here, we're not talking about the differences of opinion. My point that we're making here is that something might be from the kamaliyat, but it jumps all the way to the daruriyat automatically because of the maqasid of the Shariah. So now if Islam says, listen, it is good for you from the kamaliyat to wash your hands before you eat and after you eat. But now, if the doctors are saying if you don't do that, you might contract a virus, and then that might harm yourself, they might harm your family members, where do we place it? The daruriyat, instantly, automatically. And this is now how we can understand a basic everyday routine, but this is exactly how we understand our Sharia and the actions in the Sharia also. 5 daily prayers. If the authorities say, listen, don't come to the mosque, and we are saying, if you come to the mosque and there's going to be a large congregation, and if you find one person that is coughing and he's got those symptoms, that could affect all of you, and then you go to your homes and then it's going to spread, where do we place not coming to the mosque now? Daruriyat. Instantly. Not coming to the mosque. When some of the ulama are saying, no, it's from the daruriyat that you have to come to the mosque. But now in this scenario, it comes and now we can understand what happens next week if there is no Jummah. Now the Muslim can understand, no, this is actually what the Sharia wants from us. Because this is the understanding from the ulama. Right. In about 6 weeks, it's going to be Ramadan. What do we do about Salat al-Taraweeh? Have you ever had Salat al-Taraweeh cancelled in your life? Have you ever had Salat al-Eid cancelled in your life? What do you do? It's confusing now for the Muslim. But now we understand Salat al-Taraweeh is from the hajiyat, or maybe even from the kamaliyat, and definitely not from the daruriyat. And if it means preserving your life and following the rules, etc., then this is what we should be doing. But there is a way out, inshallah. There may be a way out, because the authorities are saying that if you're in an open space, it's different, rather than being in a secluded area. I think we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but this is an example of Taraweeh. If that is Taraweeh, then what do we do about I'tikaf? I'tikaf will perhaps be cancelled as well. Is that a problem? No, because it's not from the Daruriyat in the first place. Right. These are salawats, these are everything. But what do we do about burying the dead? Now, what I've understood from the doctors is that what they do is they put the deceased into a quarantine, and that's it. And they are the ones that will bury and dispose, perhaps even of the body, because I've heard that they're going to even cremate some of these people. As a Muslim, you cannot be cremated. And as a Muslim, there are rituals connected to your janazah. What do we do about that? Those are from the daruriyat in its asl, in its origin. But now, if there is a pandemic and you don't have access to the body, and they're saying, no, you're not going to get the body, it falls under the daruriyat in the sense that now you are not in a situation to do anything anymore. So you have to try your best to get hold of the body, you have to try your best to make the ghusl and the janazah, etc. However, if there is hardship in that, then we understand that the Shariah has said is that there can be a concession for such people. Right, then what do we do about the janazah? Do we wait for the body? Do we pray Surah al-Ghaib? The person is not here yet, we don't know what's going to happen, etc. Now the ulama, and this is now the difference of opinion based on the model that we have from the Daruriyat and Hajat al-Kamaliyat. This is an application of that. The majority of the ulama have said that it is not permissible to delay. And this is from the Daruriyat. This is the right upon the mayyit. He's passed away. The Prophet ﷺ said, فَأَسْرِعُوا بِالْجَنَازَةِ, hasten the janazah. However, now a mas'ala comes, and the madhahib are looked at it. What do we do if there is a genuine need for the person to have his janazah delayed? Now in our scenario, maybe the doctors have not released it, the coroner doesn't know what to do. Now the ulama, Hanafis, have said that it's makruh to delay, but it's not haram. The salat al-janazah. It's makruh to delay, but it's not haram. So now, if they are saying, listen, within the next week we're going to release the body, what do we do? Do we wait or do we pray salat al-janazah right away? We wait. And others from the ulama, according to the Hanafis, others from the ulama have said that it is permissible, and this is the opinion of the Malikis, for you to delay, especially if there is a reason for you to delay. But the strictest from the madhahib or the Hanabila, and they've said that it is not allowed for a person to delay. The maximum that a person should wait is a few hours, and then that is it. And that is acceptable. But it shouldn't be extended unless if there is a dire need for a number of days, 1 day or 2 days. After that, no, then you need to pray the Salat al-Janazah, and then that's it, that is done. I mean, this is an issue for the ulama to discuss, but I remember there's a fatwa from Sheikh Abdul Aziz bin Baz, rahimahullah. Even he was from the Hanbali school of thought, but even he said that if a person needs to delay the Salat al-Janazah, there is no harm in that. So now this is a practical understanding of the model between the Daruriyat and the Hajiyat and the Kamaliyat, which is that if there is a delay, it is not from the Daruriyat anymore for a person to hasten the Janazah. Then they will need to move on to another aspect of the Shariah and wait and be patient, etc. What is the ruling on panic buying? Is it from the Daruriyat that a person panic buys and he hears whatever rumors he hears and he accepts it, etc.? Or does the Sharia say, no, listen, if you panic buy, then there could be a hardship on everybody else. The elderly are not going to be able to get access to some of the things that you've hoarded up for yourself. Therefore now the Sharia has a model on that, and it says, no, you have now contradicted one of the daruriyat of the other person. Therefore it's not permissible. You understand how this is working now? And this is the depth of the Sharia. May Allah have mercy on our scholars that have passed away and preserve those that remain. Another masala that comes out from the coronavirus issue. Now, I mean, I'm not saying panic buying is a bad thing in the sense that if you want to go to the shop and you think, okay, well, there is enough here, and I think realistically I've maybe got a big family or whatever, and I think realistically if I don't buy a decent amount right now, then there's going to be a problem. But we're talking about what is realistic. Don't go overboard. This is the point that we're making, and don't cause hardship on other people, especially. Right, so that's part. What about alcoholic hand gels and sanitizers and soaps, and what about washing our hands and reducing contact and shaking hands with one another, like we have seen before? Washing hands could be from the kamaliyat. But if that is going to save people's lives, and alcohol, hand gels and sanitizers and all those kind of things are going to save people's lives, then it goes to dururiyat. If by not washing your hands enough you're going to cause hardship upon other people, etc., then it moves into the hajiyat. Allah forbid, say a person is contracted with a cold perhaps, or even just coronavirus itself. What does that person need to do? Now, understanding the dururiyat and the hajiyat and the kamaliyat, he will not fall under the kamaliyat anymore, and he will not fall under the hajiyat anymore. He will need to then isolate himself, and he will need to stay away, because the Shariah is saying, no, you need to preserve people's life, and you need to preserve your own life. I thought this is very important that we need to explain this, because some people, like I said, some people are very suspicious with the things that are happening, and they are avoiding any kind of government advice. But there are some people who are obviously very, very worried, whereas the Muslim needs to have a level of iman and tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that he needs to protect himself by what the Sharia tells us to do physically and spiritually. But there are certain things which rulings that will now put people off, because like we said, we're moving into uncharted territory. It could be that Ramadan is even cancelled in the mosque, because they're saying at the very least, if they are going to ban public gatherings, it will be until the 3rd of April at the very least, which could then mean that it's extended further. Ramadan starts 20-something. So it could be that the mosque is even closed for Ramadan. What do? The Sharia says, no, this is from the dururiyat. However, if there is a way out, you can have an open space and they permit that, then that then falls into a different aspect of the model of the Sharia, and then it will become permissible. So now, it's very important that we understand that, and we ask Allah to give us iman and tawfiq, and that Allah facilitates our affairs, and He preserves us and our loved ones, and that He lets us see the end of this, and He makes it as a purification for us all. The book Fawaid Taqwa min al-Quran al-Kareem is from Muhammad ibn Uthaymin rahimahullah. We began this last week. We talked about what taqwa was, and we looked at the first and the second point that the Shaykh mentioned. The first point the Shaykh is saying is that the people of taqwa are those people who benefit from the kitab, and they are guided by the kitab, by the book. And the second one is that the people of taqwa are the people of success. Now, it's very important for us to understand, after understanding what taqwa is in last week's introduction, it's very important for us to understand that we have been put into this dunya, and there are only one or two parties. There's the party of Rahman, and there's the party of Shaitan. You can't really be anywhere in between. You could be from the party of Allah, but weak, and be affected by Shaitan, but still from the party of Allah. Or you can be from the party of Shaitan, but you're a good person. How many people that we know are good, but they're not Muslim? Many. So they have some of the rahmah of Allah in their lives, more than others, but they're still from another party. The world is being split in that manner. When we understand that, Shaitan is calling you to something, and Allah is calling you to something else. So what Shaitan wants from us is something which is different to what Allah wants. Shaitan will call us to confusion in our iman, in our aqeedah. Shaitan will call us to a deception. Shaitan will call us to clinging onto the life of the dunya as if there is no akhirah. Whereas from the mercy of Allah upon us, He has taught us what taqwa is. And through taqwa, we can see the mercy of Allah in our lives. And we can see the enemy of the shaitan, and how he is corrupting other people, and how we disagree with other people and their practices and the way they live their lives. Why is that? Why is it that we disagree with them and we don't follow the things that they are following? It is because of taqwa, and it is because Allah has taught us what taqwa is, and this is a rahmah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah wants to show us what is good, and He doesn't want us to fall into ignorance. He doesn't want us to fall into mistake, and He doesn't want us to feel any kind of consequence of those mistakes and those ignorances. Whereas shaitan is going to deceive you, and he's trying to make it look like it is good. And when you fall into the consequences of the mistakes and your ignorance, then it's too late. Perhaps it's already affected you. But the door of taqwa remains open from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The door of tawbah remains open from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is something that shaitan cannot comprehend and overcome. And when we understand that, we will understand the third benefit from the Shaykh, أنها, that means taqwa is sabab al-intifa bil-mawa'id. The people of taqwa are able to benefit from reminders. The people who do not have taqwa will hear a reminder, or they will hear a parable, or they will hear an example, or they will hear ayat from the Quran. It doesn't really change anything in their lives. The people of taqwa, it moves them. And the dalil for that is Allah says in Surah al-Baqarah in ayat number 66, فَجَعَلْنَاهَا نَكَانًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهَا وَمَا خَلْفَهَا. The people of the Sabbath, what happened to them? Allah says, we have made this as a humiliation and a warning for those people who came within them, they were there to see it, and those people who are going to come after, who have heard about it and have not seen it. What's the purpose? وَمَوْئِذَةً لِلْمُتَّقِينَ, and a reminder and an exhortation for the people of taqwa. Imam As-Suddi and Ati Al-Awfi, and these are two Imams from the Salaf who gave tafsir, they've said that this refers to وَمَا خَلْفَ, as in those people from behind, or those people yet to come, who are going to accept this reminder, and they are the people of taqwa. They said, Ummatu Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allah has made it as a sign, and Allah has mentioned it in Surah al-Baqarah, something that happened from Bani Israel, as a reminder for the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Therefore, what we can understand from this is that it is a characteristic from the people of this ummah is that they have taqwa. That's point number one. Point number two, because of their taqwa, they are able to establish taqwa in their lives by taking heed and accepting those reminders. They look at where people have gone wrong from before and what happened to them, and they avoid that from themselves, and they remove those elements from themselves. But the question now here is, how do we recognize truly who is the ummah of Muhammad? Who are these people? Now, one of the best things I could find was a description from Imam al-Awza'i in talking about the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, specifically the righteous amongst them, specifically from the people from the earliest of the generations from Islam. He said, at the time of Fajr, or for a period of time before Salat al-Fajr, the righteous of this ummah, the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, you would find them as if birds were sitting on their heads. What does that mean? What does that mean? Someone sitting down as if a bird is on his head. What does that mean? Asleep? Huh? They're worried about the time and they don't want to miss it. As if birds were sitting on their head, meaning focusing and concentration. A bird would only sit on the head of an object where they feel that there is no threat, and if they see movement, then they won't approach that, won't get anywhere near it. The righteous from this ummah, and this is how we recognize the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, at the time of Fajr or slightly before Fajr, you will find them sitting as if birds were on their heads. And Imam al-Awza'i goes on to explain that they are still and concentrating on themselves. What does that mean, they are concentrating on themselves? Dhikr and khushu', and they are worried genuinely about themselves. They are creating an attachment with Allah, and they are telling Allah what they want and what they fear. So much so, he carries on, so much so that even if one of their closest friends came to them after having parted with them, they would not have noticed him being there next to him. They're so engrossed with that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, standing and ruku' and sujood and reciting of the Quran and making tasbih and making dua of him subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are completely oblivious to the world that is happening around them. And they would remain in that state until just before sunrise. Then, this is worship. Then they would go on to another act of worship. Then they would meet one another and sit in the circles of ilm. Ummah Muhammad, Imam Awza'i is explaining. And the first thing they will discuss is, what do you think? Taqwa, similar. The first thing that they will discuss is the akhirah. And what would become of them in the akhirah. Then they would begin with the recitation of the Quran and the studying of fiqh. Imam Awza'i rahimahullah has explained to us who the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is. And as we have seen, some of the mufassirun have said that this ayah, فَجَعَلْنَا نَكَانًا لِمَا بَيْنَ يَدَيْهَا وَمَا خَلْفَهَا وَمَوْئِذَةً لِلْمُتَّقِينَ, is that the people of taqwa will accept that reminder and accept that cautioning from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is only the ummah of Muhammad. But who are the ummah of Muhammad? Imam Awza'i has explained who this ummah is and what their characteristics are and how to recognize them. The people of taqwa, if we realize this now, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that they are the people who accept the reminders, but it is only the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that qualify in being those people who accept the reminders. What does that mean for the ummah of Muhammad in the world that we live in today? 1.5 billion, 2 billion people on the planet, of between 6 to 7 billion. From that 1.5 billion, or wherever it is, there is a portion, because not all of them are the people of taqwa. If we deduce it in that manner, we will then realize that the people of taqwa are responsible for the whole of humanity in the world that we live in today. If you take the people of taqwa outside of humanity, what will happen? It's just the party of shaitan that remains, and Allah will do with them as He pleases. But it's through the people of taqwa that remain in our homes, in our societies, in our communities, in our masajid. They are the people who remain responsible for humanity itself. And we know this for a fact because towards the end of time there will be no people of taqwa anymore. And the Prophet ﷺ said that لا تقوم الساعة إلا على شرار الخلق. The hour will only be established only on the most wretched and the most evil of people. Why? There is no taqwa left. Allah has taken taqwa away and He's doing with them as they please. So now they will see a fire, and they will see the dukhan, and they will see all these different things, and they will see the sun rising from the west, then they will feel the earth shaking, and they will see all of these things. They will see the sky being made open. They will see that the sun and the moon will be combined together and then pelted into the sea, and then the sea will become ablaze. وَإِذَا الْبِحَارُ فُجِّرَتْ, and the seas will become ablaze. The water will transfer itself into being fire. Will there be any people of taqwa at that time? No. People of taqwa are responsible for humanity. And the reason why is because they accept reminders. How do you accept reminders? How can we then become of those people? It requires a soft heart. It requires an individual who is not proud. It requires a person who realizes that this religion is either proof for him or against him, and he wants it to be a proof for him and not against him. Point number 4, taqwa أن بها مع الإيمان تنال مثوبة من الله. With taqwa, the people of taqwa will have their reward guaranteed with Allah, and it will be guaranteed and registered with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The people of taqwa will be rewarded. As for the people who are not have the people from taqwa, As for the people who do not have taqwa or not from the people of taqwa, then there is no guarantee. وَلَوْ أَنَّهُمْ آمَنُوا, Allah is saying, had they believed, وَاتَّقَوْا, and then they had taqwa, لَمَثُوبَةٌ مِّنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ خَيْرٌ, then the reward with Allah is better. لَوْ كَانُوا يَعْلَمُونَ, if only they knew. What is the benefit? What is the outcome of having taqwa? Is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will enable you to create a change in yourself. But what do you get if you change yourself? What do you get if you change your life? Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah said, a person who changes his life will enter into a Jannah in the dunya before entering into Jannah in the Akhirah. And as others from the ulama have said, there is a Jannah in the dunya, and if you don't enter the Jannah in the dunya, you will not enter the Jannah in the Akhirah. The sweetness of Iman, the sweetness of Taqwa. And it is only for the people of Taqwa in the Akhirah. And then when they enter into Jannah, Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah says that they will see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They will meet Allah, and they will see the angels, and they will see the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And all of that has no value on it. You can't buy it. It has no price. The only thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants in return for that is taqwa. So Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah said, therefore, hidayah, we've talked about what hidayah is, which is ilm and righteous action based on that ilm. If a person has ilm but no action, there is no hidayah. If a person has action but no ilm, perhaps there is no hidayah, or the hidayah is not complete. Hidayah is ilm with action. And we talked about that in the very first ayah that the Shaykh mentioned. Therefore, Ibn al-Qayyim is saying, therefore, hidayah in the dunya is priceless. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given a guarantee to the people of taqwa that they will be those who will get the reward of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, whatever you do in the dunya of iman and taqwa and khair is absolutely priceless, because that is guaranteeing your passport to Jannah. Without taqwa, then there is no guarantee for you. Imam al-Tabari, when he was talking about the tafsir of this ayah, وَثَوَابُهُ لَهُمْ, the reward of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for them, عَلَى إِيمَانِهِمْ, based on the iman of Allah bihi, وَتَقْوَاهُمْ إِيَّا, and that they've had taqwa of Him, خَيْرٌ لَهُمْ مِنَ السِّحْرِ وَمَا اكْتَسَبُوا بِهِ, is better than sihr and what they earned with the sihr. Why is he talking about sihr? After Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about Sulaiman and how Sulaiman did not fall into kufr and how they were being tested with the two angels that came to Babylon, etc., this is the ayah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about those people who engaged in sihr when they could have had iman instead. وَلَوْ أَنَّهُمْ, had they had iman and not done sihr, آمَنُوا وَاتَّقَوْا, and they had taqwa and didn't engage, and they had listened to those angels that were speaking to them, لَمَثُوبَةٌ مِّنْ عِنْدِ اللَّهِ خَيْرٌ, it would have been better for them the reward from Allah in the Akhirah. Imam al-Tabari is saying here that the reward of Allah that He has promised for the people of Iman and Taqwa would have been better from them. But however, what did they do? They saw power in sihr. They saw material gain in sihr. And they chose the dunya above the akhirah. Therefore Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, in the akhirah, absolutely nothing. So what we can learn from this is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guaranteed the reward for the people of taqwa in the akhirah. What we can also learn from this is that having taqwa is better than sinning. Because they chose sihr. And Allah is saying, had they had iman and chose taqwa instead, it would have been better for them. So let's put sihr aside, let's put the context of the ayat aside. What we learn is that taqwa is better than sinning with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the reason why is because sinning is temporary and the desires are temporary. And once you have sinned and you have fallen, you are left with the consequences, and sometimes you are left humiliated. Why did I do that? What have I done? Why have I transgressed that person? Why have I transgressed myself? That was all for what? A simple and a temporary blip of a desire that you wanted. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, no, had you controlled yourself, it would have been better for you. Had you controlled yourself, you would have mastered yourself. If you had controlled yourself, Allah would have placed Iman and Taqwa in your lives, in your heart. And what would He have guaranteed for you? A guarantee of a reward which is good. But Imam al-Tabari says, at the end of this ayah, Allah says, لَوْ كَانُوا يَعْلَمُونَ. If only they knew. He says, this is very interesting, if only they knew the reward for doing good, and if only they knew the punishment for doing haram. Therefore, he is saying here, knowledge is absolutely very essential for a person to establish Iman and Taqwa and then attain the reward of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because Allah ends the ayah by saying they chose sihr instead. If they had knowledge, but they didn't have knowledge, therefore they fell and didn't have Iman, they didn't have Taqwa. Therefore they chose the reward of the dunya, and that has sacrificed any kind of reward that they could have had in the akhirah. So now the question is for the people of Taqwa, how much do you want to go to Jannah? How important is Jannah for you? How much would you give for a life where there is no sadness or there is no hardship? How much would you give to have a life where there is only pleasures and there is no waste from that pleasures? There is no consequence from those pleasures. There is no absolute any kind of disadvantage from those pleasures. How much would you give to save yourself from ever being humiliated in front of the whole of mankind? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us the answer. وَلَوْ أَنَّهُمْ آمَنُوا. Had they believed and had taqwa, Allah would have guaranteed for them His reward, which would then basically mean you have attained something which is absolutely priceless, and you have done what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has done, and you have been qualified from those people who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guaranteed that He will not humiliate or punish on that day. The virtue of taqwa. The fifth one that he mentions, and we'll go up to 7 inshallah. The fifth one that he mentions, that taqwa, أن البر الحقيقي ما صدر عن التقوى. That true piety comes from taqwa. True piety comes from taqwa, not superficial and mechanical piety. True taqwa, true piety comes from taqwa. And he says taqwa is placed internally in the life of the Muslim, in his heart, and then it can be seen on his actions and on his tongue. How do we know that? Allah says, وَلَكِنَّ الْبِرَّ مَنِ اتَّقَى. However, al-birr and piety and righteousness is for those people who have taqwa. And this ayah was revealed when some of the people from the Ansar, they had an innovated practice that they would enter after doing the Hajj into the back door of their home and not the front door of their home. It's just what they had in their Jahiliyyah. They said, we can't go home after doing Hajj through the front door. We have to go through the back door. They just made it up. It was a bid'ah. So now when we learn, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, no, this is incorrect. And this is not from piety. And it has got nothing to do with the rituals. And you are not getting rewarded for it. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَكِنْ, however, الْبِرَّ مَنِ اتَّقَى. However, the piety that you want to attain by doing this ritual is in having taqwa. So what is Allah, if we understand the sabab now, the nuzul as to why this ayah was revealed, then we can understand how to attain taqwa and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says taqwa doesn't exist in a person when he's doing one particular thing, which is bid'ah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying here, had they left the bid'ah, then they will be upon the taqwa that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from them. However, the bid'ah that they are doing, this is not from the taqwa. Are we making this up? Imam al-Tabari rahimahullah says in the tafsir of this, فَأَمَّا إِتْيَانُ الْبُيُوتِ مِنْ ظُهُورِهَا. As for them entering to doors from the rear end, that innovation, فَلَا بِرَّ لِلَّهِ فِي. There is no birr for Allah in it. There is no piety in it. There is no taqwa in it. Therefore, innovations has no birr involved. In order for a person to be guided and have taqwa, its seat is in the heart. And he needs to be purified in his heart. How do you have a heart that is purified so that you know that you have taqwa? Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah said, you need to have 5 things and you have to have that checklist. Check it for yourself. And if you have those 5, then there is a good news for you that inshallah you have taqwa in your heart. But if you have those 5 and they are weak, then you need to improve on them. If you have those 5, if you don't have those 5, then you know what you need to do. And if you have those 5 and you feel that they are strong, obviously there's improvement for all of us, but they are strong, alhamdulillah, then praise Allah and take that motivation and that glad tidings from Allah and increase. He said, rahimahullah, وَلَا تَتِمُّ لَهُ سَلَامَتُهُ مُطْلَقًا. His heart will never, ever be pure until it becomes purified from 5 things. Number 1, his heart is purified from shirk. Because shirk removes tawheed. A person will never have taqwa if he's got shirk in his heart, major or minor. Because he needs to have all elements of tawheed firm in his heart. Point number 1. Point number 2, وَبِدْعَةٍ تُخَالِفُ السُّنَّةِ. That there is innovation in his heart, in his life, in his practices that he is connected to, that is contradicting a sunnah from the Prophet ﷺ. There is no heart that has a bid'ah in it except that it will not attain taqwa or complete taqwa. Number 3, وَشَهْوَةٍ تُخَالِفَ الْأَمْرِ. A desire that he has in his heart, a weakness, as some people call it, a hobby, as some people call it, a pastime, a killing of time, socializing, whatever people call it. He is saying here a desire that contradicts the commands which is found in the Shariah. And we talked about this last week in the definition, that there could be a command which is obligatory and a person is being very, very negligent on that. He knows he should be praying but he's not praying, therefore he's not got taqwa. But it could be something which is mustahab, but it could even be something which is mubah, and the person of taqwa is conscious of the fact that, you know what, I'm doing this action but my taqwa is not increasing, therefore there is no khair in this action. So Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah said, وَشَهْوَةٍ. You want to do something, it could be like, I don't really need to eat, but this meal looks really nice, let me go and eat, let me spend 1, 2, 3 hours socializing around this food, etc. He said, وَشَهْوَةٍ تُخَالِفَ الْأَمْرِ. That person has not attained taqwa through that action. In actual fact, he's doing something which is compromising taqwa. He might even have his taqwa reduced because he might be in that gathering, he might be doing something which is haram. وَغَفْلَةٍ تُنَاقِضِ الذِّكْرِ. A negligence, an absent-mindedness which would remove the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we mentioned before, dhikr doesn't necessarily mean a person sits there making tasbih all the time. Just being conscious that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching over you, and this is a time for you to do a good deed. Maybe it's listening to something, maybe it's talking to someone, maybe it's visiting someone, maybe it's paying sadaqah, maybe then if you've done all of that, maybe an act of worship, maybe pray salah, maybe something like that. He is saying here, when people become negligent in their hearts, when everything is just about passing time, then the element of dhikr will be removed, and when a person doesn't have that consciousness in his heart, then there is no taqwa left, or it becomes very, very weak. وَهَوَاءٍ. A desire or a whim, shall we say, which removes al-ikhlas, or shall we say an objective which removes al-ikhlas. It's probably better for us to say that. So now if your objective, if your hawa is the dunya, then that will remove ikhlas in pleasing Allah and the akhirah. If your objective is to please a particular individual and not really be concerned about what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants, is there taqwa in that person's life? The answer becomes very obvious. So now with these 5, Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah is saying here, you will not be purified in your heart unless these 5 are established and the 5 are removed. He says, وَهَذِهِ الْخَمْسُ حُجُبٌ عَنِ اللَّهِ. These 5 create a hijab between your heart and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَتَحْتَ كُلِّ وَاحِدٍ مِنْهَا أَنْوَاءُ كَثِيرَةٌ. And in every single one of these 5, there are plenty of examples we don't really have time for. But now, if you understand those 5, just like we talked about the objectives before, the Daruriyat, Hajiyat and Kamaliyat, you will then have a good understanding. And then, sometimes you'll need to reassess, maybe ask the people of ilm, etc. But if you've got those principles in your life, it's a good foundation. To conclude this point, taqwa is found in a heart, and a heart which is sincere, a heart that has knowledge, a heart that is free from innovations, a heart that is conscious. And Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, when we're talking about hearts, he says something which is very beautiful. He says, Al-qulub aniyatullah fi ardih. The heart is the vessel of Allah on earth. And he said in another place, Ayatullah fi ardih. It's a sign of Allah that Allah exists on earth. What does that mean? If you take away your soul and the heart of an individual, what's left? Flesh and bones and arteries, there's nothing left. It is the heart that Allah has put into you and to you and to you and to every single one of us, which is a sign that Allah exists. He said, rahimahullah, Al-qulub aniyatullah fi ardih, that these vessels, these souls are vessels of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on His earth. فَحَبَّهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ أَسْلَبُهَا. And the most beloved to them with Allah are those which are firm with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from them. And the softest of them, he says, rahimahullah, وَأَسْفَاهَا, and the purest of them. He said, rahimahullah, that the existence of a soul and iman in the dunya is proof that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists. Because without that iman, there will be nothing there. However, that heart and that soul needs to be pure, like he said, and it needs to be kind, and it needs to be clean in order for it then to be a heart of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this reiterates what the Shaykh is saying here, that true piety is based on taqwa. And taqwa stems from a heart which is clean. Point number 6. أن التقوى سبب للفلاح. أن التقوى سبب للفلاح. Taqwa is a cause for success. We've talked about this before, and he is reiterating this point. But this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep on saying that the people of taqwa are the people who are successful. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. Have taqwa of Allah so that you will then be successful. And what we can learn from Allah repeating this message of taqwa, success, so many times in the Quran, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not given us what we can't handle in order for us to be successful. He doesn't test us with something that will not make us successful. In actual fact, Allah's mercy and His justice is far greater over us because He wants us to be successful. Allah wants us to be good to ourselves. Allah wants us to help ourselves. Allah encourages us so many times to be of the people who are successful and the people of taqwa. And it is only for the people of taqwa who recognize this. Imam al-Tabari rahimahullah, in talking about tafsir of this ayah, he said this ayah is not for the believers alone, but it is for all of mankind. وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reiterating that He is testing you, every single one of you that He has created, because He wants you to be successful. So you can think of the most vile person in the dunya, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is being merciful to that person still. And He is showing that person so many signs for him to be successful. It is whether up to him whether he accepts it or not. But what we can learn from this is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not created us for the hellfire. Allah has created us to be successful, but that is down to our own taqwa. Ibn Qayyim again rahimahullah said, how can a person spend his time and spend his life deprived from smelling this fragrance of success, the fragrance of taqwa? Then what happens is that person, when he leaves the dunya and he's not smelt the fragrance, what happens to him? Then they leave this world as he entered it. In actual fact, he leaves the world even worse than he entered it. He leaves the world without gaining anything from it. He entered into the dunya and he was honored by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He got a nutfa, then he made it into a mudgha, then he made it into a alaq, he made it into alaqa, then he made it into mudgha. Then he breathed into it a soul, and a soul clean upon fitrah. Muslim, non-Muslim, doesn't matter. Every single one of them was born with that honoring from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But he leaves the dunya worse off than he began. Why? He said, Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah, is because he lived in this dunya just eating and sleeping and going about his day, no different to the life of an animal, no different to the life of an insect, no different to the life of a virus. The only objective was to survive and to fulfill their objective, to fulfill their desire, the cost, and sleep. And tomorrow we'll do the same thing again. Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah said, they entered honored, but they leave bankrupt. The reason why? He lived a life of helplessness. He didn't want to help himself. Allah says, وَاتَّقُوا اللَّهَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. Have taqwa, help yourself, attain taqwa in yourself, you will be successful. Allah will honor you more than the way that you were honored when He created you in the first place. So this person without taqwa, he dies a death without any success. He dies a death of sadness. And then when he is resurrected, how will he feel? Nothing but loss and regret. To conclude this point, brothers and sisters, what is success? Success is taqwa. And taqwa is optimism. Because he wants to be successful. And because he wants to be successful, he changes who he is. He realizes that this is the kalam, the statement of a person who is not successful, he changes it. He realizes that this is a frown of a person who is not successful, he changes it. He realizes that this is an idleness of a person who doesn't really have high ambitions, he doesn't really want to be successful, he changes it. He looks at his own life, he looks at the way he behaves, he looks at his ambitions. This is because Allah says taqwa creates ambitions. Taqwa creates optimism. Taqwa creates positivity. And when he wants that falah and success for himself, he will have that positivity. It will just eject from him. One of the characteristics of the people of taqwa is that they are positive and they are optimistic because they want to be successful. They become successful in themselves and they help other people to attain success. The seventh point, the last point for today, inshallah, anna bit taqwa, he says, through taqwa, tanal ma'iyat Allah al-khassa. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with all of His creation. There is no element of His creation, subhanahu wa ta'ala, except that He is with them through His knowledge. However, there is a withness and a closeness that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to a specific group of people in this dunya. He is with them with His love. He is with them with a special kind of kindness. He is with them with His expiation and His maghfirah and his expiation. He is with them with His tawbah. He is with them with His glad tidings. He is with them because they say His name, He says their name back. He is with them and He protects them. The Shaykh is saying here, through taqwa, Allah will be close to you in a way that He is not close to anybody else. It says in Surah al-Baqarah, ayah number 194, وَعْلَمُوا, have ilm, make it part of your aqeedah, that it is from Allah's names and attributes that He is with the people of taqwa. وَعْلَمُوا أَنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ الْمُتَّقِينَ. Allah is with the people of taqwa. Ibn Kathir rahimahullah says, وَإِخْبَارٌ, and this is information and knowledge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, بِأَنَّهُ ta'ala, that He subhanahu wa ta'ala, the most lofty one, مَعَ الَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا, He is with the people of taqwa. How? بِالنَّصْرِ, with assistance, with ta'yeed, and the protection في الدنيا والآخرة. He will protect them and He is with them in a way that He is not with anybody else in the dunya and the akhirah. What do we know from the hadith Qudsi? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that if He comes to me with a handspan, I go with Him at arm's length. He comes to me with a foot, I come to Him running. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with the people of taqwa, not in a way that is normal with anybody else. It doesn't exist. And we will find this being affected in our youth today, unfortunately. I've seen some people from the older generation they have a level of taqwa within them that makes them think different to the way even I think and the younger generation that they think. And I boil it down for them having taqwa, and it is because of their taqwa Allah has made them firm. So you will find them constantly being worried about the welfare of other people, the elder generation. Not all of them, of course, but some of them constantly being worried about other people, constantly crying about what's going to happen to this next generation, constantly worried about their akhirah, constantly worried about the akhirah of their loved ones. Why are they like that? It is because there is an element of softness and taqwa that Allah has placed in their hearts, and Allah has got close to them. And because Allah is close to them, now you can see the impact of this individual on how he thinks. It's not normal. He doesn't think like normal people. He's constantly worried about what's going to happen to the iman of this person and what's going to happen to the akhirah. You can't buy that. You can't study that. It is the closeness of Allah that Allah has with that person, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that closeness has an effect on that person's heart and the way they speak and the way they behave, and they think the things that they advise one another with and the things that they are worried about. Their hearts have become soft because Allah is close to them. Their hearts have iman and taqwa because they have a knowledge that most people don't have knowledge of, or they don't think about, which is the knowledge of Allah and the akhirah. And because of that taqwa, their goal is the akhirah. However, let's compare that to those people who perhaps Allah is not close with because they don't have taqwa. The generation that we have in front of us, Muslim or non-Muslim, their interest is in only satisfying their desires, whether it's by playing, whether it's by laughing, whether it's by major sins. All of it is based on their desires. And in actual fact, most of their lives is a way that they've set up for themselves is the complete opposite of what taqwa should be. So the person of taqwa talks in a particular manner. The person who doesn't have taqwa, he talks in a particular manner. He just calls it banter. He swears and he ridicules people and he's just having a laugh. It's not the way that people talk. The way he dresses is to fulfill his desires, to give himself an arrogance, to give himself an image. It's not the way that people talk. The things he eats, the things he puts in his ears, the things he inhales, the things he looks at. As a result, such people have lost their fitrah, such people have lost their maturity. And you can find this level of corrupted fitrah and corrupted maturity in all ages. You'll find it as early as 8, 9, 10, maybe even younger, and you'll find it as late as 50, 60, 70, 80. Why? Is because they forgot Allah. And they forgot their responsibilities with Allah. They became deluded with the life of this dunya. And as a result, Allah is not with them at all. Allah has left them to do whatever they want. So the conclusion of this point, and the last thing we will say today, is that taqwa, if you have it in your life, Allah will be with you. He will help you. He will nurture you. He will assist you in your life decisions. He will give you maturity in your iman and in your heart. But if Allah is not with you, then the only thing that will please you is yourself. The only thing that you will want are your own desires. And Allah will leave you to it if that's all you want. Allah will leave you to it. We ask Allah to give us iman and tawfiq, and that He protects us from leaving taqwa, and He gives us taqwa, and He facilitates our taqwa, and He multiplies our taqwa, and He makes taqwa firm in our hearts and in our lives until we meet Him, and then He unites us with the people of taqwa in the akhirah. هذا والله أعلم وصلى اللهم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. As for next week, we don't know. Just keep an eye out on the messages and we'll see what happens, inshallah. Any other questions? سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك. Yes.
Masjid management authorities, they decide to not come to masjid for
Yeah. That's a good question. Fiqhi perspective, if the salah has been cancelled in the mosque, does the mu'adhin need to come and make the adhan still? This actually happened in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, which is that there was a severe rain, and the Prophet ﷺ told people to pray in their homes. And this kind of gives us the understanding of what we were talking about before, which is Salatul Jama'ah Hajiyat. Coming to the mosque, injuring yourself, loss of property, loss of wealth in the process of doing that, a fear for yourself, a fear for your family perhaps, a fear from being contracted with something, that is all from the daruriyat. So the Prophet ﷺ commanded that the mu'adhin say, "Ala sallu fi rihalikum." Instead of saying hayya ala salah, instead of saying come to the salah and come to falah, hayya ala salah and falah, he said, "Ala sallu fi rihalikum, ala sallu fi rihalikum, Allahu Akbar, la ilaha illallah." And that was the adhan. Meaning, don't come to the mosque, pray in your homes. Don't come to the mosque, pray in your homes. So this we can then understand the point that we were mentioning before, but like you've said, if the mosque is shut, then there has to be one mu'adhin that makes this call in the whole city. Because the adhan is fard al-kifaya. So as long as one mu'adhin can do that, then it is sufficient. But even if let's say they said nobody's allowed to go on the road, and I believe in certain countries they're saying that there's a complete lockdown, and if you leave your house without a legitimate reason, they will fine you, then even that will then be reduced to being nothing. Why? Because we are preserving the daruriyat, and that takes precedence over the hajiyat. So Allah knows best as to what's going to happen. And this is why I explained the principles rather than the examples. Because we don't know what the examples are going to be. There may be somebody who has his body released, he's passed away from coronavirus. We can do a perfectly fine, normal janazah over him. But what if we can't? What if a person only finds alcohol hand gels and he thinks, no, I don't want to touch alcohol, etc. But that is the way that he's going to preserve himself, and there is no alternative. What does he do? We go back to daruriyat, hajiyat, kamaliyat. And if we can understand that very well, then we can understand a great deal from this religion, not just specifically to coronavirus. Yes, sir.
I've got a general fiqh question about the adhan. If I'm with a couple of brothers, for example, and we want to pray Asr Salah, do we have to do the adhan, or we can just iqam and then pray?
If there's a congregation that's happening not in the mosque, do we need to do adhan and iqama? And the majority of the ulama have said that it's still recommended for the person to do that. But it becomes fard if nobody in the whole area has done it. If that makes sense. So say you're in a town or you're in a city, and there's nobody who's done the adhan, and you think, I don't know if that's feasible, if that's actually likely, but let's just say that you're in a locality, because the ulama have said it's fardul kifaya, meaning the Muslims of a particular area, one person has to make the adhan. Hypothetically, we've got 60 mosques, 70 mosques here in Leicester. Not every single mosque hypothetically need to make the adhan, but it remains mustahab because of the question that you just asked. If you've got your own congregation, it's recommended that you have the adhan and iqama. It is not a condition from the salah that you need to have the adhan or the iqamah. However, if there is not one Muslim in the whole city that's done the adhan, and there's Muslims living in that city, then it becomes, every single one of the Muslims becomes sinful for that. Yes, Anis. Okay. So a person was told that the water was infected, so he left the water, and then he made tayammum, and then he prayed salah, and then it became clear to him that the water was not infected. Does he need to repeat the salah that he has done with the tayammum? The majority of the ulama will say yes. But a group from the ulama, including the Hanabila, etc., they will say no. And the reason for that, and I feel that this is the correct opinion, is that as long as a person has done what he has exercised all of his measures in completing at that moment in time, and he's made a decision based on that, then that act of worship is valid. Another example, a common example, which you probably can relate to now. A person is on journey, he doesn't know which way the Qibla is. There's no compass, there's nobody to ask. What does he do? Which way is the Qibla? He estimates, he thinks, okay, when I'm traveling southeast must be this way. So he prays that way. But then he realizes that the motorway turned that way and he's going back that way, so he actually prayed in a different direction. Does he need to repeat the salah? No, because he made the ijtihad at that time and he thought that was correct, and then that is sufficient. So, inshallah, you don't need to repeat your prayers. Wallahu a'lam. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu